Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hello. It's so nice to be here. It's lovely to see you. My name is Ems, as you've heard, and I've got a little bit of feedback on that thing. Don't you worry. Are we doing okay, Si? Awesome. Brilliant. Don't you love tech, people? Fabulous. I love a bit of tech. It's so good. So, I'm going to be speaking today, and the talk is called RSJ. Now, does anyone know what an RSJ is? Put up a little tiny hand. Okay, cool. So an RSJ is actually a roll steel joint. Giving you a little bit of, exciting words here. But what's really interesting to me about an RSJ is the profile of it. Because from the end, it looks like the letter I. Okay? I want you to remember that because it's important later. So if you got that in your head, good. Now, my RSJ doesn't mean roll steel joint. It stands for something else. But it's still about the strength and support and building that God does with us. But first of all, I'm going to read you a sentence. Now, some of you are the kind of people who like to take notes. And if you do, there are notes. Where are the notes, Joel? Where did they get put? There's somebody waving them. If you want to take notes, I've done a little handout. If you're the kind of person that likes to doodle, likes to write stuff down, likes to remember stuff, grab one of those because they are there. So does anyone want one? Go and grab one. Cool. First, a sentence for you that's quite random. Mr. Owl ate my metal worm. Okay? Now you might think, the speaker's just got a bit mad. But no, Mr. Owl ate my metal worm is my favourite sentence that can be read forwards and backwards. Look at it. Are you getting it? It's crazy. Mr. Owl ate my metal worm. You can read it forwards and backwards. Some of you don't believe me, but you're just working it out. Okay. That is also relevant later. So I'm giving you two things to remember. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ems, and so you can get to know me a little bit more, we're going to play a game, okay? Now this game is called True or False. Now if you're my family here today, you're not allowed to answer any of these questions, and you're not allowed to help anyone, and you're not allowed to nudge, okay? But the rest of you, you're going to play this game. It's so you can get to know me and hopefully each other. So we're going to play it like this. If you think the answer is true, raise your hand, proud and loud, okay? And if you think it's false, keep your hand low. It's really simple. So imagine you're all saying something's true, put your hand up. Really slow, but well done. Okay, and if you think it's false, keep your hand right down. Okay, that's how it is. It's really easy. So true or false? I lost my thumb in the hinges of a train door, age 6. True or false? Praise and raise. Oh, some people believe it's true. Okay, I will tell you later. True or false? I learnt to tell the time at university. There's some people there who are incredulous at that statement. Quite a lot of people think that's false. Okay, no judgment here. Number 3, I am obsessed for no reason that I know about. Oh, thanks, Kay. Rude, also funny. Well done. I'm obsessed by servant culture of the early Victorian period. True or false? Okay, there's a lot of people putting their hands up there. Number 4, I do not trust margarine. True or false? Okay, there's some strong feeling about that. Okay, and 5thly, I once spent an evening in a prison cell. True or false? Okay, this is fascinating what you think about me. I need some prayer. If the prayer team could come now, that would be awesome. So what I want you to do is realize that what I've said to you so far today is all true. All of those things were true. And now you're going, why are you preaching? Because you're quite a weirdo. They're all true. And the things that I'm going to say today are all truth facts about how God feels about you. What we're going to do is turn to the person next to you and tell them a true fact that they may not know about you. It has to be true, has to be 10 seconds. Go. True fact, 10 seconds. Okay, now I want you to swap. So next person say something that's true. Okay, so hopefully you're now feeling like you know the room a little bit better, and that's brilliant. It's all about how we know one another. Now, today I've got 3 points, and they are RSJ, you already know that, but I've also got 3 sound effects. Can I get an ooh in the building? Thank you. This may or may not work. If it doesn't work, we're going to laugh. If it does work, we're going to laugh. Okay, so first sound effect, people, is this. Are we hearing that? Okay, does anybody know what that sound effect might be? A reversing vehicle was correct. Well done. So the first word that I'm looking at today is the word reverse. Can you all say the word reverse to me? Reverse. This is the R of RSJ. Now, I'm really good at reverse parking. Unless someone's watching me, or unless someone is in the car, or unless I've had a heavy meal, or in fact, I'm not very good at reversing. In fact, I get a bit panicky. We've got a really big van, and I will drive around the block many times in order to find a really good space, which is why I'm always here about an hour early. But God waited until everyone was watching and everyone was waiting, and then he reversed in a pretty big way. And that's what God did with the cross. In fact, he used the cross to reverse the chaos that we had caused in the world. And this week, that feels a really powerful statement to make. The cross reverses disorder and restores order. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge that we heard about a few weeks ago, their eyes were opened, weren't they? And they saw and realized for the first time that there was separation growing in the garden. There was separation growing between each other, and there was separation growing between them and God. And so God knew that he would one day need to provide another tree of knowledge. That he would one day need to provide a tree that sorted out the separation. And the cross is a bit like that second tree. Ready for the next sound effect? Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, it's okay, it's all good. Ooh. You anticipated that, didn't you? A bit early. Right, so this is a weird sound effect. Okay, I'm going to play it. What does that sound like to you? What does it sound like? It's not a clock, but well done. It's a swish. I want to imagine like a swish. It's the sound that I feel for the word swap. Swap, swish. Some of you are going, that's not a sound effect for swap. But for me, that's the sound effect for swap. The S of RSJ. A beautiful exchange took place the day that Jesus died. You see, Jesus took what was rightfully mine, and he gave me what was rightfully his. Let me explain that a little bit more. Now, just before I do this, I want to say that all my analogies today are flawed. So I don't want you to come up to me afterwards and go, so basically I was really listening to that, and then theologically you lost me, and I thought, you know what, that's actually unbiblical, so I left. You know, it's okay. Everything I'm saying today is slightly flawed, but I'm trying to make it simple. So will you give me the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, that's okay? Cool. Okay, good. So the other day, we went out for a meal to a really nice pub near us with John's parents, and we ordered our food, and it all arrived a bit mixed up. So I ordered gravy with mine, but they gave me a little jug of cheese sauce, no gravy. And my father-in-law ordered mushy peas, and they gave him garden peas, which is unacceptable in his world. My mother-in-law ordered chips, and they brought mash. Rude. Okay. Now, there was a lot of unnecessary washing up, lots of little plates, lots of little bowls, but it was quite handy for us because I soon realized that the girl had bought everything we needed. It was just on the wrong plates. And so we spent a little fraught moment where we were like, no, that's yours, that's yours, that's yours. And we were left with the right plate. So the three of us were creating a swap. Now, God didn't get anything wrong on the day that Jesus died. He was not some confused waiter who got the order mixed up. He was engineering in triune form, the three of him, was engineering a different plate in front of me and you. You see, he looked at your plate and he looked at mine. He looked at your destiny and he looked at mine, and he could see something poisonous on the plate. He could see something deadly and toxic and disquieting, something that caused total separation, and he was not okay with that. In fact, as a loving and beautiful father, he couldn't bear it. And so what he did was he swapped plates. Do you get that? Because he knew that what was in front of us, we just couldn't handle. So, like in an epic movie when the music starts to tell us that a hero's coming, you know, when the music changes and everyone's like, yeah, there's a hero coming. That's the music change that we're having now. This opportunity for a destiny swap, but that's not all. So let's just read our passage for today, which is taken from Romans chapter 5. You might want to look at it, but it's also going to be on the screen. And I'm reading it from the Message version, which is a bit more of a colloquial version. It's a bit more of a street version that sometimes has a slightly different slant. And if you're familiar with this passage, it might be that you're not familiar with it in this version. So I'm going to read Romans chapter 5, verses 6 to 11. Christ arrives right on time to make this happen. He didn't and doesn't wait for us to get ready. He presented himself for this sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyway. We can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for, and we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to selfless sacrifice. But God put his love on the line for us by offering his son in sacrificial death when we were of no use to him whatever. And now we are set right with God by means of this sacrificial death, the consummate blood sacrifice. There is no longer a question of being at odds with God in any way. If when we were at our worst, we were put on friendly terms with God by the sacrificial death of his son, now that we're at our best, just think of how our lives will expand and deepen by means of his resurrection life. Now that we've actually received this amazing friendship with God, we are no longer content to simply say it in plodding prose. We sing and shout our praises to God through Jesus, the Messiah. So, fairly beefy passage there, but I'm going to break it down for us. But first of all, who wants another flawed analogy? Yes, praise and raise. Lots of people saying yes. So, if I could at this moment, I would run up to the pulpit for this next bit, but it might play havoc with the cameras and the sound, so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to play my third and final sound effect for you. Anyone know what that might be? Effie. It is a tapping. What kind of? It's not knocking at the door. I'm going to give you a clue. The word that you're looking for is justice. So what might that noise be? It's a gavel. Well done. So, who likes a courtroom drama? Anyone into courtroom dramas? There's some brilliant ones at the moment on Netflix. But I want you to imagine for me that you are now in a courtroom. This is actually quite a good building to pretend to be a courtroom. And I want you to imagine that the pulpit there is like where the judge sits. Can you do that for me? Just turn that in your mind. Well done. What does it smell like to be in this courtroom? What does it feel like? What can you hear? What can you see? Now, your feelings might change when I say, I want you to imagine that you are on trial today. And we're all here watching you. Anyone feeling a little bit more awkward now? I know I am. You've been told beforehand that the prosecuting lawyer is about to ask you some questions. And you know she's flipping clever. And you know you're going to plead guilty because there's no point lying. So you're called to the witness stand. And you swear to tell the truth and sit down. You take a deep breath and you ready yourself for the onslaught. And then the back doors open. And everyone gasps. And the lawyer turns to see a man come in at the back. And there's a bit of hiatus going on. And then she changes her mind and flicks through her paperwork and she says, I call this man, Jesus Christ, to the stand instead. And you are really confused. In fact, you start to protest, but everyone else seems to be expecting this. And you've not been in this situation before, so you're asked to leave the witness stand having said nothing, and you resume your seat. The lawyer begins to list your crimes and misdemeanors, things you're super familiar with, but she's now aiming them at Jesus. And she starts with seemingly little things. Jesus, did you exaggerate on your university career in your CV in April 1999? Did you steal the office stapler in December 2001? Did you lie to cabin crew to get an upgrade to Turkey in October 2019? Did you tell the woman at Slimming World that you had not sinned when you in fact had 2 hobnobs, an entire Tesco's strawberry trifle, and an 8-piece dipping boneless feast from KFC the night before? But then it turns a bit more serious. Did you cheat on your wife in February 2012? Did you hide an addiction? Did you embezzle money? Did you bully that colleague? And more questions come. Now, I don't know what the lawyers would accuse you of, but I know some of the things in my back catalogue, and they're not very pretty. And you feel desperately that you want to interrupt the proceedings, but you can't. And you hear everything you've ever done wrong being listed out loud, and it's somehow so much worse because it's being directed at Jesus. And he's totally silent, listening to these charges. And you know full well he's innocent of every single one of them. So you assume that your turn to speak will come. And then the judge speaks to Jesus and says, you are accused of the crimes that this person, and she motions to you, has committed. Sorry, what just happened? Now, I want you to say your full name to me out loud. Can you say it? No? Come on, you need to know your full name. Some of you don't know who you are, which is a little bit scary. Let's try that again. I want you to say your full name to me out loud. Go. Well done. So you, James Nathaniel Harrison, just saying. I'm not saying all of you are James Nathaniel Harrison, but you, say your full name, are free to go. That's what you hear. And you're led away from your own trial without ever having to testify against yourself. Do you understand how nuts that is? And Jesus is taken away as the guilty party, and a strange but beautiful kind of historically incredible and theological justice that you will never understand has been enacted. So take a breath for a minute. I'm coming down from the pulpit now. Now, obviously, we know it didn't happen in a courtroom like that, and there are many flaws with the kind of analogy that I've presented. But we know that that's the nub of what Paul is saying here. You see, you and I were given freedom when we deserved the opposite. So the cross is 3 things. It's RSJ. It's the sound of the reversal of chaos. It's the swapping of what we do deserve, death and separation, for life-giving connection. And it's the story of justice being done at Christ's expense. So it's RSJ. So let's unpack a little bit of what the Bible says here. In verse 6, it says, Christ arrived right on time to make this happen. So let's talk about the phrase, at the right time. Now, the world was prepared spiritually, physically, and historically for Christ to come at that particular time. I don't know why Jesus didn't come in the age of social media. I don't know why he didn't come as an Edwardian, or in the Middle Ages, or as an ancient Egyptian. But I do know that the Bible says that Jesus came into the world in the fullness of time, which is kind of the Bible's way of saying God knew and God understands why. I'm not going to argue with God on that. His coming was predicted and prophesied, not with dates and times, but with specifics. And we know that the Old Testament is full of wonderful hooks that we then see the New Testament putting a coat on of like, yes, that's why, and yes, that's when. And although the Bible doesn't give us any reason why Jesus came at that time, there were a number of factors that made it easier for the message to spread. So one was that in that time, the international language was Greek. So most people spoke Greek. The second thing is that most people were able to learn a whole scroll off by heart. I'm not great with my best friend's phone number. So maybe Jesus didn't want to come now because he's like, well, they wouldn't remember anything. But in those days, they literally could remember the whole of Matthew. There were people who could just like recite it off by heart. I'm not great at that myself. So that was maybe another reason why he came. And thirdly, there was peace in the empire and a great road system. So I don't know why Jesus came, but there's some things that people say. But most importantly, he came when we were still powerless. So to you, what's the definition of somebody powerless? Now, I might be talking especially to new parents here. So over there, hi people. I think that being powerless is a bit like a newborn baby, because as Paddy's holding Caleb there right now, Caleb can't actually hold himself up. So if Paddy let go, Caleb would probably tumble. That's the definition of powerlessness. If we weren't held up by God, we'd tumble. And babies don't know what they need, do they? Sometimes they'll have a little cry, and we're like, are you hot? Are you cold? Do you need a clean nappy? And the baby's like, I don't know, I'm a baby. I don't know what I need. And we're sometimes like that with God, aren't we? We don't know what we need. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. Notice that Paul says, for while we were still weak. I really like that, because Paul's pretty hench emotionally and spiritually, but he still uses the word we. While we were still weak, I'm counting myself as part of that, he says. And then it says, Christ died for. Now, I looked up the word for in the Greek, and it's the word huper. I'm going to call it like that, huper, which means for the sake of, on behalf of, or instead of somebody. So Christ died on behalf of you and me. And to be able to genuinely say that Jesus died for me, I must genuinely be able to say, I can't die for myself. Okay? I have no ability or power to die for myself. The next bit of that passage says, the ungodly. Now, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I am ungodly. And also so are you. And you might say to me, well, how very dare you? I'm not ungodly at all. I'm a decent person. I take my neighbour's bins out. I give to charity. I keep to the speed limit. And every second Wednesday, I am vegan. But it all depends by what standards we are judging ourselves by, doesn't it? And Paul makes it super clear in an earlier part of Romans that everyone apart from Jesus has fallen short, that everyone is guilty of something. Now, I found this amazing picture, I think it might come up on the screen, of this guy. What a dude. He is called the Reverend Mule, which I think is a great name. And he was a bishop of Durham. And he said this about this verse that I thought was absolutely beautiful. He said, the ungodly here are not the flagrant and disreputable only. They are all who are not in harmony with God. I think that's a great definition of me. Not in harmony with God, not singing the same song. Sometimes I want to sing my own song, and God's like, no, you need to be in harmony with me. And I don't know anyone who is in harmony with God all the time. I know some people who can sing well with Jesus, and I know some people who are really holy, but we all mess up, don't we? So Jesus died for everyone who is not in harmony with God. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that means us. In other words, he died instead of you. Like when we went back into that courtroom, he took what you had done, what I had done, on himself. Verse 7 says, rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. And this fits our experience, doesn't it? Many people might consider risking death on behalf of a good cause or a good person. But few of us would knowingly risk our lives for a criminal, say. We'd struggle, wouldn't we, if someone said, oh, could you just die for this guy here? These are the crimes that he's committed. We'd be like, oh, if you're okay, I'd prefer to go over there. But Jesus took what we did and was like, no, I will die for that. And that kind of, for me, the mechanics of that is the wrong way round. You see, people die for a cause. They die for an idea. They don't die for somebody who's flawed and sinned and weak and ungodly. That doesn't make human sense. It is foolish, unless you're God and you have a very different motive for dying. Romans 5:8 says this, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And I know people often say this when they're speaking, that they preface something that they're about to say by saying, if you remember nothing else from what I'm about to say, remember this. So that's the preface. Please remember that verse. That's the key verse for today. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The cross is a demonstration of God's love. Now, he might show us additional ways that he loves us, but he can't offer a greater way. Do you get that? He shows us different ways that he loves us, but the cross is the greatest way. It's the most controversial. It's the most supernatural. It's the most miraculous. He doesn't need to do anything else. It's just that he does, because he's amazing. But he doesn't have to. If that was all he did, it would be amazing enough. But he does a whole Bible worth of more, and a whole lifetime for each of us of more, doesn't he? I don't know whether you've ever been to a demonstration, but it's a show of feeling, isn't it? It's people together rallying around, supporting something, protesting about something, showing solidarity. And this is God at a demonstration with his Son and the Holy Spirit holding a placard that's the shape of a cross. That's his placard, that's his protest, and that's what he's standing for, and it's what he's standing against. And the work of Jesus on the cross is ultimately the proof of two things, love and hate, on one piece of wood. So love and hate in that cross. The cross is a demonstration of man's hatred of goodness. Because what did we do when we met God? We killed him. That's what we did when we met the God who created us, who gave us the reason that we're alive, who gave us the ability to worship, who gave us purpose and freedom and life and joy and peace. We killed him. But it proves the height of God's completely incredible love, that our desperate act of hatred, he just was like, I'm going to nail love to that. So the cross is the ultimate RSJ. And because of that, it means I can be forgiven. That profile that I told you about earlier, that I and you can be forgiven. So the vehicle is reversed, the plate is swapped, and the justice is served. Now those three things are the mechanics of the cross, if you like. They're the structure. But the cross is not just about the fact, historically, that Jesus died on a particular day. It's about why. And if you've never understood that when Jesus went to the cross, he didn't just do it for the person in front of you who looks really holy, but he did it for you when you were at your absolute worst. If you can look at the part of your life that you're least proud of this morning, and you can say, that was when I was at my worst. It might be that you're at your worst today. And I can faithfully assure you that at your very worst, Jesus is at his best. And he will come in and meet with you in that place. Because Jesus died for me as an undeserving, ungodly, unkind, and unlikely person to be saved. So this death, this cross placard, this demonstration to the world of God's love for us isn't just helpful when we die, but it's helpful for us when we live. Because it gives us the tools to do our own loving and our own hating. Now, you might be like, oh, Ems, I feel a bit awkward about you asking me to hate things. But don't worry, because it's in the Bible. It's okay. So in Romans 12:8, it says this: hate what is evil and cling to what is good. And that is quite challenging this week, isn't it? As we see the news. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good. We have an information war going on, don't we? The Bible doesn't want us to hate very much, but it does want us to hate evil. And Paul's saying here, don't just avoid evil. Don't just give it a wide berth. Don't just say, oh, not today, thank you. Choose not to go near it. Choose to hate it. The battle of Christian living is a battle mainly to get our emotions changed, not just our behavior. You see, Christian living is not just about choosing, it's about choosing with intensity. It's about choosing it hard. And Christ dying was not just about choosing, it was choosing intentionally with purpose and with love, because when Christ died, he saw you. He saw me. And what I love is when Jesus says in Matthew 9:12, those who are healthy have no need for a doctor. It's those who are sick. So I said I'd come back at the start, didn't I, to what God said when he provided the second tree of knowledge. Because what God did is he allowed the beginning and the end to read the same backwards. See, Mr. Owl ate my metal worm is a brilliant description of what the wisest being did to the most horrible snake. What he did was he destroyed the power of death and sin, and he did it through the cross.
Hey people, it's very nice to see you. I wonder if you could have a little think for me about what a turning point was in your life. So just have a little think. What was like a huge turning point for you? People got one in their heads? Okay. For each of us, we'll have a different experience. We'll have something that means something very personal to us. But we're talking tonight about a turning point for all of us in history, for all of us theologically. We're talking about what Jesus did for us on the cross. Are you up for that? A little bit of that. Now, those of you who are here this morning, point your hands in the air. For those of you who are here this morning, you're getting a different talk, people, because that's how we roll. So, those of you who wanted to hear it again, you can always go to the beauty of YouTube. I've got a horrible story to tell you first. So if you're squeamish, put your fingers in your ears right now because you might not want to hear this. Okay. I was recently reading a quite fabulous book by the comedian Bob Mortimer. I don't know if you've come across the new book by him. It's called Underwent, and it's really good. But he tells a grim but fascinating story in it. And what he experienced as quite a young child at school was there was a guy in his school who had like an egg on his head. And it was kind of like a big lump on his forehead. And one day this kid got into a fight. And during the fight, Bob noticed a little tiny bit of yellow coming out of this egg. Okay, I told you it was grim. It gets worse. So what actually happened was that Bob, who's always been a bit fascinated by grim things, decided that he would try and get on top of this kid and squeeze. So basically, this child had been told by his mum, don't touch that thing on your head. You're just going to live with that forever. Don't go anywhere near it. Don't touch it. But Bob went there. And basically, he got on top of this kid and he squeezed this egg thing. It's horrible, isn't it? But what happened was this string of disgusting pus came out of that thing into a pile on the floor, and the kid got up with no egg on his head. And he tells that story in a very funny way in the book. But I was thinking about that as I was writing this talk this week and thinking, I can't think of anything more disgusting, really, to do. And yet Jesus looks at my sin and sees it as even more disgusting than that. And what he chose to do was get involved. Was kind of come to me in the places that I was in and be like, yeah, I'm going to deal with that for you. His mum was like, no, leave it alone, don't touch it. Don't go anywhere near it. Leave that egg on your head, it's going to be there forever. You're going to be called Egghead for life. But for some reason, Bob was like, no, I'm going to go there. And I bet that kid is really grateful. Wherever he is now, I bet he's like, I was the kid with the egg on my head. They don't call me that anymore. Romans 5, 6 to 11, we're going to read it in the NIV version this evening. This morning I blessed you all with the Message version, but we're changing it up a bit. Why be the same? So if you have a Bible in front of you on a phone, then you can follow along. So it's Romans 5, 6 to 11. You see, at just the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? For if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? Not only is this so, but we also boast in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we've now received reconciliation. Okay, there's a lot of big words in there. I used to be a primary school teacher, so part of me just wants to go through all the words and explain them and write little pretty pictures for you, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat you even more like children. So, when you were young, did you ever play the game of Uno? Or do you still play it now? Anyone play Uno? Okay, so this is the gospel according to Uno. So, I'm going to tell you those verses just using Uno cards. People are going, really? Yes. Okay. So this morning I used 3 words to really sum up the talk. Can anyone remember what they were? There was R. What did that stand for? Reverse. Well done. What was RS? What was the S? Swap. Well done. And what was J? Justice. Well done. So RSJ was the joist that holds up the cross. Okay. So if you've ever played Uno, this is a reverse card. This is what Jesus did on the cross. He reversed it back to him. Come on, people, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then what he did is he made someone else, himself, pick up the penalty. You see what I did there? Okay, so we've got the +4. He picked up a lot of cards for us. And then finally, he changed the colour of what we could expect. Yeah? So think about that as we carry on. The gospel according to Uno. I need to give some credit to Sam Hancock for that, because as we're talking about tonight, he was like, oh yeah, it's a little bit like that card in Uno. And then we kind of developed it. So Sam, it's you, babes. It's all for you. For you and for me, God reverses the play. And he made his son pick up the penalty, and he swapped the colour that we had made the world for a brand new colour. And it was the colour that the world used to be in Eden. Now, in this and in the following verses, Paul provides really clear evidence of God's love for us. First, it says, Christ died for the ungodly, which Paul really clearly defined in earlier passages as meaning all of humanity. And this sacrifice was made while we were weak and powerless and helpless, depending on the translation. And this morning I said, that's a little bit like a baby, isn't it? A baby is weak and helpless and powerless. But actually, the Greek word, which I'm not going to try and pronounce very well, but I'll give it a go, asthenon. We'll go with that. Asthenon, which means vigor and strength, without vigor and strength, living in a state of weakness. So it's more than just being helpless like a baby. It's actually being feeble and frail. It's almost, the sense is almost sickly. So while we were still sickly, Christ died for us. While we were still helpless, doing nothing to deserve our salvation, Jesus rocks up. So secondly, how did God prove his love for us? Well, he did it by acting first. He didn't wait for us to become strong and godly and worthy of being saved, which was a flipping good job, because he would have been waiting a very long time. He loved us and took action to save us while we were helpless to save ourselves. And I absolutely love that about him, that he saw the state of play in my heart and he knew he had to do something about it. Thirdly, God showed his power by sending Christ to die for us at exactly the right time. So Jesus arrived, he lived and died and was resurrected at the exact moment in history when his action would accomplish the very most that it possibly could. Now, I don't understand that, because I might, if it was me, I might be like, oh, maybe we'll get him on Facebook, or we'll get him on Oprah. But you see, Jesus wasn't interested in fame in the same way that perhaps we would be now. He was interested in how he was going to save the world. And I don't know why he chose that particular time, but we know that the Bible says that it was God's timing. So this morning I spoke about how the cross reversed, swapped, and dealt with justice. And I talked about the reversal and the weight of sin and death. So let's talk a little bit about reversal. I don't know whether you've seen those pretty amazing videos on the internet of film reversal where a bullet goes back into a gun. Have you ever seen these ones? I really recommend them. They're really cool. So like the bullet goes back into a gun, or a crowd uninvades a pitch, or like a footballer unscores a goal. That's not as good. Or the rocket descends back down to earth and like all the smoke billows dissipate. That's quite cool. And they're quite interesting to watch. And there's whole books that have been written on the premise of things going backwards. But God did way more than this on the cross. He undid the problems that separation from him caused, but he also changed the rules. Yesterday, my dad gave me a check, bless his heart. I love my dad, he's awesome. And he gave me a check yesterday, and it was only when I tried to pay it in today that I realised he'd written it in my maiden name. I'm like, I've been married 22 years. I love my dad. So I had to ring him and say, actually, I'm really sorry, but I can't pay that in because I'm no longer called Emma Rookwood. And it was really lovely to see my old name. But in the cross, Jesus gives us a new name. He gives us a new identity. And for that, he goes back to the very beginning of time. He goes back to Eden. And one of the main ways that he did this was by reversing a curse that we read about in the Old Testament. Now, I'm sorry to be graphic again. You're like flipping at this woman, she goes there. I think it's having 3 boys. You're just used to kind of foul stuff being spoken about at the dinner table. You just get used to it. But I want to explain something a little bit about the Old Testament and death and stuff like that. Are we good? Okay. There's people who are just putting their fingers gently in their ears. Under some forms of capital punishment, the body of a dead person who was effectively a criminal would be dumped like rubbish in a throwaway site, okay? Or maybe worse, sometimes they left them to rot in really visible places. Like imagine going to the co-op and like, ooh, but that's what they did. It was like a deterrent. They put a dead body, they were like, yeah, don't do that or you'll end up like him. But not so for somebody who was hung on a tree. So in Deuteronomy 21:23, way back in the Old Testament, it says of such a criminal, you are not to leave his corpse on a tree overnight, but are to bury him that same day, for anyone hung on a tree is under God's curse. You must not defile the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. That's pretty hefty, isn't it? So God places his own son in this position, the position of the curse of heaven. And there's something so dire about the impact of being put on a pole, as it is sometimes, or on a tree. The law of Moses said that touching a dead body was defiling. In other words, that dead bodies, if you touch them, you would become unclean as well. So they mustn't be left hanging because it would defile you. But it also, I don't know whether you noticed, but it also said it would defile the land. So it's not just making you unclean, it's making the territory unclean. It's also the worst kind of disgrace and shame imaginable at that time. And one commentator powerfully wrote these words: "Those who see a man hanging between heaven and earth will conclude him abandoned of both and unworthy of either." Those who see a man hanging between heaven and earth will conclude him abandoned of both and unworthy of either. Oof, that's hefty. So that's what Jesus went through for us. He went through the fact that he was halfway hanging between heaven and earth, wearing that curse for you and for me. Now, I don't know what the worst curse is that you can think of. Don't worry, I'm not going to share too many because we are in the Church of England. But years ago, I used to work with this great keyboard player. And he had this fabulous story about one day he was walking home from a gig we did in Liverpool. And he was going back to the place where we were staying. And as he was walking across this kind of bit of wasteland, these two scallies came out and they were having like argy-bargy with each other and cursing each other and swearing and stuff. And then one of them just like shouted in this guy's face, "Your mum's your dad." And I just thought, that, your mum is your dad, okay? Now that's the end of, like, that's an amazing curse, isn't it? Your mum is your dad. And like Robbie, my friend, like came home and just said to me, like, what even is that? It doesn't even make sense. And I was like, no, it's very funny though. Jesus underwent a triple curse. May even have been more, but there was 3 that I could think of. So it was the curse of the law, because it was the Mosaic law, the curse of his father, God, and the curse of men. So that's at least 3 curses he underwent. What greater proof of love is that? In Galatians 3:13, we find out that the curse goes even further because Paul writes, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming the curse for us." So he wasn't just subject to a curse, he became the curse, he embodied it. Sounds like a Marvel film, doesn't it? He became the curse. So what do we mean by this curse? Well, to be cursed might mean different things to you. In fact, I'd like you to have a small chat with the wise person next to you. If you don't have a wise person next to you, lean in to somebody else who looks wise around you. And what I'd like you to do is just say, what does it mean to be cursed? What do you think it means to be cursed? Okay? Chat to the people around you. 2s and 3s is fine. Okay, so I'm going to draw you back. There's some fascinating conversations going on. I like this. Okay, so there's different kinds of cursing, aren't there? I spoke about a verbal curse. What other kinds of cursing did you talk about in your groups? Was there anything else? What does it mean to be cursed to you? What was going on over here? Hope, I heard you say something. It was very good, apparently. We're all now really excited about what Hope's going to say, aren't we? I'm not building it up or anything, but okay. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, very good. Okay, so just to summarise that for the tape and also for people on this side who perhaps not have heard, Hope tape. How old am I? Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, don't you love that? Well, reel to reel we're doing this evening. Oh, bless me. Oh, that's really sad, isn't it? Let's just have a little moment where we think about how old I am. Hope was talking there about the curse that's in a fairy tale. First of all, which is, like a verbal curse, I guess, but that we're talking about how that changes the nature of what happens in that fairy tale. Yes. Good. Okay, so the curse is changing her identity somehow. Okay, do we have agreement over there about curses changing our identity? Interesting. Anything else that anyone wants to shout at me for the reel to reel that we're doing here? No? Okay. I think it's quite interesting that the curse that we talk about, we kind of gloss over things like this, don't we, often? And I've read these verses lots of times in my life, but it's only really the last couple of days that I've been thinking, what did it mean for Jesus to be cursed or to become a curse? And that's really interesting what you guys are talking about, like how it changes the identity. Because to be cursed in the Old Testament anyway was to be removed from outside the camp. It was kind of to be taken away from the presence of God. So if you were cursed, you couldn't live in community with those people anymore. You were banished. You were like cut off from everyone. There was no connection for you anymore. And there was a sense of shame. There was a sense of disconnection, to be tarnished, ridiculed, shamed. So on the cross, that's what happened to Jesus. It wasn't just like he died a physical death. His whole identity changed for that period of time. His reputation, the relationships that he had fostered, his miracles, his teaching, his purposes, everything was subject to possible destruction because of that curse. So why would Jesus go through that for somebody as flawed as me? Why would he go through that for somebody not perfect? And I love the fact, as I was writing this, I didn't mean it to rhyme, but sometimes when you're writing, stuff comes to you, doesn't it? And I just wrote off the top of my head the other day, he represented the Jewish nation of covenant breakers, Sanhedrin lawmakers, prophetic fakers, Mickey takers. He died for people of every religion, every ethnicity, every age, every time in history, every ability, every disability. He died for those who were ill and those who were well, for those who understand and for those who scoff. He died for those who dance and for those who mourn, for the intelligent and the illiterate, for the wise and the foolish, for the leader and the follower, for the lost and the least, and for man, woman, and beast, depending on what kind of theology you've got. So he exposed himself to the full weight of God and became a curse. He was cut off from the presence of God as well as the people of God. And on the cross, Jesus enters into that experience of full forsakenness on our behalf. I think that's pretty amazing. And so on the cross, this curse is kind of displayed. And this morning I spoke about it being a demonstration. Do you remember I said that the cross is like God's placard that he holds up at his demonstration? And then in the tomb, that curse gets completely wiped out. Come on. I mean, that's so exciting. The power of that curse gets completely replaced. And the opposite, what would you say the opposite of cursing is? Blessing. Yeah. And it says, since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more then shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? That's verse 9. So the curse is broken, and in its place is our way back to God. We're saved from the wrath of the law, from the curse of God, and from our own stupidity, right? Because as I said this morning, so much of what we do is just plain stupid. Like, we meet the face of God, and what do we do with him? We kill him. And so now, because of the cross, because of the mechanics of the reversal and the swap and the justice of the cross, the RSJ of God, we get the opposite of what we deserve. And we're saved from what we do deserve. And so now we get to be set right with God by means of this sacrificial death of Jesus. So we're no longer seen as his enemies. Now, I don't know about you, but when somebody hurts one of my children, I get a bit mummy lion, you know. And I can remember one of my kids coming home from school and telling me about this child in the playground. And suddenly, I was really tempted to give their mum like evils in the playground. You know, be like, yeah, I'm not talking to you because you did that to my son. But God never looked at us like that. He never looked at us with that, you are evil, even though we are. Even though we are, and even though he could look at us, he chose to look at us through the image of his son. That's incredible to me. That when God looks at me, he doesn't see Ems Hancock. He sees Jesus Christ. And I might peer out from behind Jesus a few times and do something really stupid. But God still sees Jesus in me. Even when I don't see Jesus in myself. That's what God chooses to do, because that's what love does. So, who does that mean that we are in the light of Romans 5? What does it mean to be people who no longer live with that curse over us? Well, for me, it means we're no longer seen as enemies. We're no longer slaves. We're no longer under curse or law or the whim or the weight or the woes of man. We're no longer hated or disgraced or misplaced or shamed. And the first and the worst curse has been burst and then reversed. And then the meticulous, ridiculous plan of heaven has been outworked in blood and sweat and ugly death, as the cross did a dirty work. It banished chaos so that we are no longer blamed or ingrained or imprinted with the label of sinner. And now in place there is you and me dressed as winner, swimming in unfair, grace-filled justice. And as we look around the rooms of eternity, we will see the many reasons why he did it. The faces of those who owe their destiny, their eternalness, to the turning point, to that moment. The moment where you and I were given permission to go free. So what's your response tonight? Is it one of praise? Are you grateful, or are you stunned? Sometimes when we give someone a beautiful present they don't feel they deserve, they want to run away from it. I remember once giving a child a gift when I used to work for the Salvation Army years ago. We used to do quite a lot of things around Christmas time and giving children presents. There was one little girl who'd never, ever received a present in her life. And it was a wrapped Christmas present. And she was so uncomfortable with the idea of being given something that she threw the present at me and ran away. She was like, that's not for me. And there are some people, that's their response to Jesus. He offers them this beautiful present with their name on, and they say, that's not for me. And it's not to do with the present, it's to do with how they feel about themselves. So can I encourage you tonight, however you're feeling, whether you're feeling like you want to praise Jesus for your incredible destiny, or whether you're feeling a bit stunned by the fact that he bothers with you, even though time and time again you let him down or you let yourself down, that you remember that that present has your name on it, that it's for you, that the curse has been burst and reversed for you, and that God's ridiculous and meticulous plan wasn't some kind of cosmic error that he came up with when the filing system in heaven got messed up. It was always meant to be the second tree of knowledge. So let's pray.